Imagine going through school, being able to read words, but not actually understand what those words mean. That's the crisis we're faced with in South Africa. Almost 81% of grade 4 learners can't read for meaning, and this is concerning. So today on this podcast, this episode, we're going to unpack why libraries are still important, why they play a role in our communities, and why we should be advocating for a library bylaw. We are joined by Ziyanda and Sihle from the ASRI Future Leaders Program, and we're going to unpack a lot. Hi, Ziyanda.
Hi, Tadiwa.
How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. Thank you so much for joining us. So my first question for you to start us off, why is literacy so important in South Africa?
Thank you for that wonderful question, Tadiwa. You said it yourself in your introduction. 80% of our grade 4 learners can't read for meaning, and that's really something that is difficult to come to terms with in our day and age. These are people that are going to go on, they're going to be our presidents, our politicians, they're in charge of our futures, essentially. And so at this base level, if they're unable to understand what it is that they're reading, or even place logic within, their everyday lives, which is basically what understanding what you read, like it's the formation of what you're understanding when you're reading for meaning. It really is like a shocking thing to come to terms with, because later on in our futures, these are the people that are going to be leading us, and we really want to make sure that we are equipping them as best as we possibly can for themselves and also for us.
That is like such a powerful point, and you actually touched on something that I was going to ask, because they speak about it on the news, reading for meaning, but like to the core, what does reading for meaning actually mean? Because you'd think, oh, I can read, it should be fine, but when we see a reading for meaning, could you unpack that a bit more for us, please?
Okay. Reading for meaning doesn't mean necessarily regurgitating words on a page or sounding out certain words and sounds. It's you being able to do those things, being able to sound out the words, regurgitate those words, but also being able to interpret them as well as analyze them. So it's bringing in that logical aspect as well to it. It's more so like the analysis, genuinely understanding instead of just repeating what's being told to you or what you've been taught.
That is such an important point that you have made, because if you can't read for meaning, like it's very much a struggle, and it obviously leads to illiteracy. So my next question would be, how does illiteracy affect beyond the English class for children?
Okay, so this is also a really important question. They're all important questions, but it has more so to do with creating a sense of demotivation or a lack of confidence in the learner. So this has like a harmful ripple effect on their lives and also their journey in education. Because once they feel demotivated or they feel just a little bit less confident, they start to care less, try less within the classroom. And eventually that leads to certain things, unfortunately, such as dropouts and a barrier to participating later on within the economy and, socially as well. So
that is very important, because it goes beyond just our everyday, on the ground, but also like the future. And you've touched on a bit about like how it affects them socially and economically. Like, are there any other aspects in which illiteracy can affect children beyond that? And maybe you could even like expand a bit more on how it affects them socially or economically, and why it's like really so important, why we have to tackle this issue.
Wow, another great question, Tadiwa. There's lots to unpack there. So in terms of how illiteracy can lead to further socioeconomic issues, you really need to go back to, like I said before, this feeling within themselves that maybe they aren't necessarily smart enough, and also creating a sense of I don't care or a blasé attitude within like their everyday lives, which they're learning in their formative years within school. So it's really important to grab a hold of this issue now while it's still in its formative stage, while it's still at the basis, so that later on when it gets to points such as dropouts, they take the other way and decide to actually stay within school. Because without continuing on their educational journeys, at least with basic education, they'll be unable to participate within their socioeconomic environments later on through potentially not getting jobs that would be good enough for them, not qualifying, all things like that.
I think that is such a powerful point, because even when you get to university, some people still struggle to understand what they're reading, what they're studying. So I think like what you're saying, it has to start at the formative years.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very, very important, and it is something that we should really be like working on. So my next question would be, we see a lot of libraries around, but some children don't really utilize them, even in schools or like the community libraries that are available. What do you think hinders children from actually going to libraries and actively partaking in reading?
Okay, so we did a little bit of field work, my research team and I, and we actually found that children, first of all, amongst other reasons, they're unaware of the services that are provided to the libraries in the first place. So they see these buildings, they don't really understand what's going on in there because they're not being taken there by adults that are in charge of them, or they only associate things like reading and education and that kind of stuff with school. And so they're not taking reading and learning home with them, which is what the library is for. It's supposed to be this free communal space where you go and you learn and you socialize. And you even learn more than just, your on paper literacy, you get social literacy skills as well. So I'd say that's one of the factors that hinder them from going in, is really just a lack of knowledge, knowing what's in there, knowing what the library provides. And also just this notion that it has to be boring, that a library is just a place that you go and you get a book and you sit down and you read and all of those types of things, when actually if you go to children's sections within libraries, there should be engagement that's being encouraged by librarians, by the library environments as well. Because like I said, it's not just on the paper literacy reading, it's also social literacy.
Wow, that is very amazing. And I think sometimes we can underestimate how literacy goes such a long way, or like the roles that libraries play rather. Because I can remember, like, when I was a kid, I'd go to the library for my friends most of the times, but eventually, like, I'd still have to go in the library and read, or even learn computer, like, literacy skills, because the computers are available. There's, like, play areas for kids. So I really, truly understand when you say, like, it plays a role for the development of the children. And I really like the point that you touched on parents playing a role.
Yes.
I understand it's because parents work long shifts. You're probably tired. You're not able to invest in reading with your kid. But how do you feel like parents can go an extra mile to assist their children to, help them read better? Like, what is your take on that?
Okay, well, it's just a simple matter of going with the child, taking out a book with them, or maybe not necessarily going there and being with them to take the book out, but also, taking that book, whatever they have, reading to them. That's also a very big key thing that we're missing within literacy. That's also how children learn as well, is through being read, through being taught, hearing stories, also forming that idea of storytelling within themselves, which later on helps them within the English classroom, as we see as you go along in your education journey and you're writing essays and, you have to understand that kind of stuff. So it's really just small things like that, showing the child that, it doesn't have to be a thing that you do on your own. You can make it fun. Even within the Joburg, the main library within Joburg, we went and we spoke to the librarian there, and she spoke to us about all sorts of things that she does as an adult to enhance the experience, the literacy experience for the children that are at the library, through puppet shows, making funny voices when reading to the children, that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be a 2-hour long process, but just taking away 10 minutes from your day and being able to engage with the child and showing them that, it can be a fun thing and we do it at home. It doesn't just have to be mutually exclusive for a school setting.
That is amazing and very powerful. So what I'm hearing is that the bedtime stories that my mom used to tell me are useful. Be the reason why I can read today. That's very interesting. And I like how you touched on the points on how libraries can be more fun, like puppet shows, It also includes visual. I think that's visual skills also being developed. So it's very powerful. It's very amazing what these libraries are doing. So you heard it from Ziyanda in terms of libraries. We're going to move on to Mr. Sihle Nzuza, who's going to speak about the library bylaw itself. Ziyanda, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any final words to say, any call to action to the viewers that are watching?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me,
It's a pleasure.
And second of all, please, please, please support our library bylaw. We are really trying to get it out there. We are trying to have you understand how important it is to, encourage our children to utilize these facilities, Thank you.
Thank you.